Voices from the Mausoleum is brought to you by the You Run Podcast Network and yourunpodcast.com.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome to another indie horror author interview. Today, I am joined by Jacy Morris, who is the first time on the show, but that's always super exciting because I know I promote my friends all the time, and I think people think I'm a fake reader because I don't ever have people on that aren't people that are my friends. But yeah, how are you? Thank you for making time to chat with me.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Just out here promoting a book, meeting you for the first time, so this is exciting.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on. This is great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, my co-host and I both are just huge advocates for the indie horror community, and I tend to lean more towards like the indie book community, and then he's more indie film, and it makes a great mesh because you meet some of the coolest people in the indie horror community when you take the opportunity to talk to them and help promote their stuff. So so you have written a ton of stuff. This is not a new thing for you to have a book out, but you're a screenwriter, an author, and a writing coach. And I know you've got a very long list of things that you've had come out, but I know your two, I think, biggest series are This Rotten World and One Night Stand at the End of the World. Those are the two longest ongoing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are those collectional type stories, or are they more like novella novel, and then it's just like a continuation?
This Rotten World is a zombie apocalypse series, and it's full on novels.
Okay.
It has
Dang.
the first 5 were one storyline, and then there will be 6 in the second storyline. So I kind of reset it into like going back to the beginning because I'm all about the beginning of the zombie apocalypse and like the chaos and stuff of how that goes. And so after part 5, it was a new set of characters, new location, same sort of carnage. So I started over again with that. So those are full size ones. It depends on what your definition of a novel is for One Night Stand at the End of the World. I consider them novels. I'm not too picky about word counts and things. Those average about 50,000. They're nice, quick reads, a couple hundred pages. And those are all like one long storyline that's kind of building up to a crazy climax here. And that one's sort of a satirical tale of a comedian who travels around sort of in the apocalypse, and that's how he makes his living. He goes places, and he's not actually all that funny, but it's the apocalypse. There's not a lot going on, right? So he does that, and he's broken and twisted and weird, which is the way I like my main characters. So
that sounds like a good time. Sounds like you're in the right genre. Writing characters that are like that. Yeah. I also am a big fan of like the beginning chaos of zombie apocalypse stories. So I'm super excited to get an opportunity to jump into these soon. I added them all to my my TBR once we were introduced via Kat Silva. So yeah. So the story we are of course here to talk about is Bury My Heart with a Keyboard, which just came out as we're recording this. It just came out yesterday. It's out by Third Estate. And this is a collection of stories. So I guess I kind of want to just jump in here with what can people expect out of the stories in Bury My Heart with a Keyboard?
So the stories are sort of, it's kind of weird. They're like how artists have portfolios.
Oh yeah.
They open it up and they're like, hey, look at this thing I can do. Look at this thing I can do. Yeah. And that's kind of the way Bury My Heart with a Keyboard is. It's kind of a collection of all the things I can do. So they're all indigenous tales, not all of them, but most of them. And there's a lot of politics in there. There's a lot of horror in there, a lot of weirdness. Basically, for Third Estate, we wanted to kind of myself and Aquino and Kat, we're all on the board, and we want this thing to succeed. So, I had all these stories just sort of collected. I wrote them all in 2023, I think. And then I was like, we should probably show people what we're about. We've got a mission statement, but mission statements they mean a different, like you can read it and I'm going to see something in there that I believe, and I'll read it and you'll see something in there you believe in.
No, sure. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So we kind of wanted to set the stage for these are the types of things that we want to see. We want people to, harness their identity and bring it through the lens of horror,
Yeah.
while delivering solid horror, but at the
Yeah.
same time, being true to yourself and being an artist and actually having
Yeah.
something to say.
I love that. Yeah. And I was going to say, talking about looking at it as a portfolio, I think that's a really smart way to do collections as an author too, because most people do write a variety of things, and a collection, like you said, I mean, that's a great opportunity to really just show people what the different angles and different things are. Some of the best collections I've ever read had stories that were just miles apart, but they were just from the same writer. So that's really cool. I'm going to pop this back up because I did want to talk about the cover. First of all, I love the color. I love horror that is like bright colors, because I feel like everything horror is black and red. So when somebody goes outside the box and does different colors, I think that's super cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a Don Noble original. Don's been my cover guy for quite a while now. I think since probably the pandemic, when I was like, oh, let's get serious about writing. And I was like, I better go find people that can make covers here. And Don is the first one I stumbled on, and I gave him the idea and he made it. And we added that color splash, and I was like, dude, that's it. That color is so vibrant. And like, you don't see that color on a lot of covers, No. So I was really happy with it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it looks really, really good. Is Bury My Heart the name of a story, or was that just something you came up with after getting it together?
Bury My Heart with a Keyboard is my play on the book Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, which is sort of this, historical accounting of they called them the Indian Wars, but indigenous wars that we had with the American government. And for a lot of indigenous people, it's kind of like the first step to realizing just how big the scale of genocide and colonialism was. And then you sit there when you're done with it and you're like, wow, so much pain and suffering. And that's all filtered down to me and who I am. And that's kind of, these stories have that pain and suffering in there, along with, the humor and the will to overcome and succeed mixed in there, because that's part of our identity as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I didn't even think of that, didn't even come into mind, but I love that. I think, and I love that. I feel like the indie horror space is one of the very few, I would say, I guess for lack of a better word, like community that really allows for all kinds of people to put out their art, and it's, for a really long time, horror was just a white guy's thing. Like nobody else could get into it. Nobody else was given opportunities, whether you're talking about books, film, television, any of it. And I feel like I really didn't start realizing just how many different types of stories I could get from different perspectives of all kind of people until I was a bigger part of the indie horror community. And it's honest to God, it's one of my favorite things about it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, when I first started writing, I was just writing about sort of white characters doing white things. I'm like, well, that's what everyone wants. That's what I see out there. That's what sells.
Yeah.
And I think I saw some TED Talk from an author. I can't remember her name, but her TED Talk's called a Single Story. Have you ever heard of that one?
I haven't. No.
If you go onto YouTube and just search for a single story, she puts it into very eye-opening perspective of this happening to her. And I was like, oh my God, that's happening to me. I need to break out of that. And so, my earliest writings were that, until I saw that TED Talk, and I was like, why am I not writing about myself and who I am? Why am I not bringing my perspective to the world versus just mimicking what's out there? Because I think that's what sells. So.
Yeah. And I think people, obviously when you put any time or love into any project, you want it to be well received. And it's such it's a hard thing trying to put those pieces of yourself in general, just being vulnerable in that way, but especially in this type of world where things are unfortunately the way that they are with some of the bigger horror writers and what people expect. I mean, I know even on the filmmaking side of it, we are just now really starting to see an increase of people of color, of different ethnicities and backgrounds, and family styles, really getting an opportunity. So, and I know that's a big thing for Third Estate in general. They're very focused on the individual voice and how many different variations of that there is. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that whole concept of bringing yourself to it is huge for Third Estate. Even just encouraging writers to go out and write it. Maybe it's not a fit for us, but it should be a fit for someone. Yeah. And, you know, that's going to spread throughout the indie community and hopefully up to the, you know, the bigger guys, right?
The big five and beyond. Yeah. No, we need it. And I think because you see so often you see calls that cater, like specifically they'll say catering to or looking specifically for, and they'll say, you know, like queer writers, or they'll put people of color, but it's like they only do it like once a year. And then it ends up being all of these people putting, you know, their stories and their art into this big bowl, basically, and hoping to get, you know, drawn out. So it's great to have places like this that are willing to do that and make it a priority. It's an amazing thing to see. And so Third Estate, you said you mentioned 2020 and taking writing serious. Is that when you started writing all of these books that you have out, or?
I'd been writing, but with very little success or awareness. Sure. I've always just kind of been like, as a writer, like I don't really care about book sales or anything.
Yeah.
I don't really care. Like bury my heart with a keyboard. I'm not making a dime off of it. I gave it to Third Estate because I wanted to help the press. You know, I don't really care about that level of success. Sure. But I do want people to read the stories, and I want to connect with people in that way. That's interesting to me because again, it's all people from different life, and I've, you know, since I started taking it seriously and understanding the business side of it, I had that COVID time to dig into it and do research and look and see like, well, what are other people doing? You know, and I had to figure that out on my own. Like no one was helping me do it. No one came and was like, you know what you should do? You should try this. I wasn't very active on social media. I wasn't really connecting with other writers. I was just out there doing my own thing. And, you know, I had the people that read my stuff, loved my stuff. Yeah. And, but that's where it stopped, you know? So I had to do that. And that's kind of like when I'm doing writing coaching, you know, it's not just the writing, it's all the stuff that goes with it. It's, well, how do you get this out there? What do you do with it? How do you make sure this doesn't sink into oblivion? All this hard work you did, because that hurts. It doesn't feel good when it goes out there and no one sees it, you know?
Yeah. Did you find it was hard to get into a groove of like promoting yourself? Because I always see people post, and I'm actually the same way. I always feel like I'm not allowed to promote my stuff. Like I'm always worried that like if I promote, then people are going to unfollow me, or people are going to get sick of it, or I feel like it's maybe not good enough to promote, or I just always struggle with like imposter syndrome. Did you ever feel that way trying to get used to kind of doing it in this newer way?
I never really felt that way. I think the only time I've ever felt that way is with this book, because you know, because it's not really about me. Like when I put out a book, like it's really all about the marketing for me. The social media aspect doesn't really do a lot to move books. I don't know where that came from. There's like lightning in a bottle stories, right? Where people have, you know, it got shared by this influencer and that influencer, and that's not going to happen to me. I'm not that person. I'm not like some cool guy walking around, you know, doing cool things all the time. I'm mostly a writer.
So, no, I get that. Yeah.
So I've never really been a big promoter. I'm more of a marketer on the after the fact. I can sell books. I can find ads places. I make good ads. And that sells things. For sure. But for this one, you know, working with Third Estate, working with Aikido and Kat and Cody's over there and Yana, and we're all, you know, we're all in on it. You know, we're all in. We're all trying to pick and carry up, you know, a piece of the weight of this press to get it off the ground. So I was like, you know, it's not my thing, but I'll do it. And I think I did it all right. You know, I've been doing pretty good. I do worry that people are sick of it because that's all I've talked about for like the last month leading up to it.
Yeah.
But
You're supposed to do that.
if I didn't believe in the book, I think I would have stopped.
Yeah.
But I believe in the book. Like, I maybe have one other novel where I'm like, oh yeah, I think that's my best one. And then there's this one, which out of 26, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
so
I was
I'm
gonna
really
say, I know
happy with
it's a
this
long
one.
list. Yeah. You've written a lot. And with this, you mentioned that you had stories already. So were all of these stories you sort of had just been working on and just had? Were there any that ended up being new, or did you have to change any, like a lot, to get them ready for this book?
No, they kind of came in 3 phases, right? So my first like traditionally published book was a novella, and I was like, oh, everyone wants novellas. I'll just write novellas, I guess. And so I wrote 3 of them, and they were bizarre and political and very weird. And Third Estate would have taken them. I don't think any other publishers would have taken them. People like them.
Oh, okay.
They read them. They were like, I don't know, So I was like, all right, I'll just hold off on those and see what happens. And then the first third of the book is a bunch of short stories I wrote. I went to see Carson Winter kind of read Post Haste Manor in Portland. And he was in this place and we were drinking beers and I was listening to it. And I was like, I can do that. And so I went up to the lady and I was like, hey, when can I read here? And she gave me a date and it was like, I want to say like 3 weeks later. And I was like, oh, okay, I better write some stories. The first third of it is like my overconfidence in a public setting as a result of that. And then when I was doing writing coaching, I had someone, and then the other third of it is I was doing writing coaching and I was trying to help people work on short stories. And I'm not a short story person. I write novels.
Yeah, sure.
And I was like, I don't have this experience. I haven't done this. And so I just, for the month of August last year, was it last year? Yeah, the month of 2023, August. Yeah. I was like, all right, let me just submit all these things and try this out. And so I think there's probably 6 or 7 of those stories made it in there. I sold one of them, which was amazing, but it's a very cutthroat industry, the short story world. So I had to get that experience to be able to help my writer.
Sure. Yeah, no, for sure. I went through a weird phase myself of like trying to do submissions, and then I just decided I can't handle it. I'm like, it's just too much, and I just want to do whatever I want to do, and I don't want people to tell me no, or even really yes anymore. I just want to do it myself. So it is a weird industry, the concept of short stories and people getting them for anthologies and putting them in even like e-magazines and stuff. It's a very very interesting thing on the internet to experience and see.
I mean, it felt like I was back in college, right? Where like someone gives you an assignment and you're like, oh, I don't really want to write this. I don't know what you're going for, but
like
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And it's funny because I feel like, I know a lot of writers, I feel like in kind of our community specifically. And some people, God, they love it. They love writing story, like shorts, and like they love the whole process. And like they're always like, oh, I'm querying this. And I'm like, never, I will never be able to do. I don't have it in me. It's going to be self-pub the rest of my life until I die, because I just don't have it in me to deal with, kind of all the things that come along with that. But I think that when you get lucky and you find a community that is so welcoming, and you find people like the people who work in for Third Estate, and you're able to kind of build up, a support system, when it comes to your writing, because it can be hard to get yourself and your stuff like in front of more people. Especially when, like you said, it feels like sometimes it's not what they're looking for, because it just seems to be this cookie cutter expectation of what horror is supposed to be. And I know, so with this collection and kind of the way you just told the story of how you got into, or, the sections of the stories that you did you have a hard time with any of these stories? Were you able to just kind of get them out when you were ready, or did you struggle with anything writing them out?
I'm very lucky in that way that, like,
that's good.
I sit down and I think of a story and I go, here's the beginning, here's the end. the
Yeah.
middle will just happen.
Oh, I
And
love that for
it
you.
just,
Yeah,
it just
that's
comes
awesome.
out that way.
Yeah.
So I don't,
Yeah. That's
that's
good though.
my struggle is that like, I don't have enough time to do
Oh,
all
I
the
get
writing I want to do.
Yeah.
But I still do a ton of writing, right? But it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like some sort of addiction for me, I suppose, where
Yeah.
I'm just like, I want to write, I want to create. I think
Yeah.
it's very satisfying to be able to bring what's in my head out into the world and
Sure.
have people look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was going to be my other thing is like you must have some like mad time management skills because like you've put out a lot, like you've done a lot, and so and that was going to be something else I wanted to touch on because I know everybody's got their their different way of doing things, their writing process, their editing process, their all these different steps to before you get to the final product, and that was going to be one of the things is how do you manage to find time for it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky enough to where I've been a teacher for like, this is my 21st year.
Okay.
I'm lucky enough to where sort of my sales are sort of taking off to the point where I was able to go halftime.
Oh, nice.
And that
Oh,
helps
that's
out,
nice. Yeah.
right? That helps out hugely.
Sure.
I'm also a very disciplined person in my own
Oh,
life as far as like,
that helps.
I'm going to do this. I don't feel right unless I get my 2,000 words. And if I finish them real fast, I'm going to add more to it. And I have a mind that can juggle multiple projects. So
Yeah.
I might be working on, I think this summer I was working on 3 or 4 books at the same time.
Yeah.
Just because, I could revise, I could edit,
Sure.
I could write on a couple at the same
Yeah.
time. Because I find my runway stops at about 2,000 words. So if I still
Okay.
got time, I have to switch to a different project.
Oh,
I can write about, 2,000, 3,000 if I'm pushing it. And
yeah.
then I run out of story. I need to step back and think about it. But I always
Okay.
have the other story in my back of my mind. So
To
it's,
be able to go to. Yeah, I envy people, like yourself, and Kat Silva's the same way. When I
Mhm.
talked to her about her last release, she's just like, "Oh, I just did it." And I'm like, my brain cannot understand. But I think it's awesome because it's especially because anybody who's experienced, who is a writer, who's experienced that desire to write but can't find the time, it's excruciating sometimes because if you're a creative person in general, you have to find time to create or you'll drive yourself crazy. So it's awesome that you're that able to do that both because of real life things and then also just the way your brain works. That's awesome. And I wanted to kind of talk just a little bit more about you specifically because I was reading in your bio that you kind of fell in love with punk rock, and then you're a horror movie person as well. Was there a specific band or song that got you into punk rock?
I've always been attracted to the sound, even as a
Yeah.
kid, right? Like when I was growing up,
Yeah.
MTV was always on,
Yeah.
and the songs that always kind of caught my interest would be kind of those grindy
I
kind
get
of
that.
punk rock songs, like the Ramones were out there.
Of course.
And this is like before I was like 5 or 6 or something, right? I'm not like
Yeah.
out there buying records. It was records and tapes back then. I wasn't buying any of them, but they just kind of, those sounds stuck in my head. And
I get
as
that.
I got older and I started, having that buying power,
Yeah.
I would find things, right? And because it wasn't sort of mainstream and there was no one sort of pushing me to it, it
Yeah,
was
I
just,
get that.
I love that sound. Where can I find that? What can I find?
More of it. Yeah.
And sometimes I'd hear it in movies, right? Like even when I think back to like Trancers when they're doing like that Jingle Bells version, I was like, that song is awesome. What band is that? How do I get that? But
how do I get more?
so stuff like that would always get my attention.
Awesome.
And then and then when I got older and I could figure things out, I just kind of went from one band to the next, started going to shows, and it's just a part of my ethos.
Yeah. No, I love it. I always, whenever I talk horror with people, we usually lean heavy into, movies and books. Obviously, I don't ever really get to talk about music, so it was just something I was just curious about, like kind of what started it, because like I was born in '88. I didn't discover anything past like radio music until I was probably in high school, and that's when I kind of hit my, like, as they call, like the emo phase of when I started listening to, like, I started finding other stuff too, like grunge music and like punk rock and like alternative, which means very different things now than it did in the 90s and early 2000s. But, and just finding the different types of music and realizing that those kind of different, I guess, subgenres of that whole bigger picture of rock style music was was super appealing to me. And it's just something that's carried over. Like it's one of the few things, like if I'm just having like the worst of the worst day, there's so many songs that I can put on that fall into any of those kind of subcategories, and it just feels like it's lifting. It's just such a good time, and it's such a great sound, and I just don't ever get tired of it. I just never.
Yeah.
No.
I'm the same way. I think my iPod has like, I have an old school iPod that I just carry everywhere with me. I have like this old speaker at school.
Oh my God,
it's like paint stained, and like I just throw this chunky iPod in there, and I think it's got probably like 8,000 songs. I mean, it's like,
yeah,
it's a lot. I mean, I had a lot of CDs and music back in the day, which I just ripped and threw onto an iPod. And like, I haven't listened to, like, the only time I ever listen to a radio is when it's in someone else's car. I've got my own soundtrack to my life.
I love that. No, it's awesome. Music is such a driving force behind like the way you feel, motivation. Like I know tons of people make playlists for their writing stuff. Is that something you've ever done? Made a playlist?
I did one for Bury My Heart. I kind of did like a song pairing for it. Like I didn't, because I don't fixate. I don't try and find like things that'll match my mood or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I did try to match songs to the stories after the fact, after we decided to publish it. And I'm like, I need promotion ideas. I don't know what I'm doing. And then I was like, I'll give each song each story sort of its own song pairing, which was fun, a little challenging. It like turns out I just wanted to compare everything to a Dropkick Murphys song. Like apparently I can make every story I have a Dropkick Murphys song.
That's perfect though.
So.
No, I love that. No, I love it. And I've never done that specifically, but I do tend to find maybe specific songs or specific artists to listen to when I'm writing. But as far as the playlist, like I know, like, and I love seeing when people post about playlists for stuff, especially stuff I've either already read or am about to read, because it's just kind of a fun little thing to like think about this song or this artist when you're reading this specific story or these specific stories. So that's cool. I was just curious if you ever made a playlist for the stuff that you put out. And yeah, so this came out as we're recording this. It came out yesterday. Don't worry, everybody. Jacy's links and where you can get your own copy are going to be in the description for this episode, so you can go grab one. I guess my final thing as we wrap up here is I wanted to kind of talk about, because you've talked about your writing being political and you focusing on, your own voice and who you are. Is there something specific that you hope people get out of reading this collection?
I hope people just think and dwell upon the ideas that are broached in the stories, because there's interesting, I say a little bit about lots of things that are important to me. Like there's not like one common through line. Even some of the stories that aren't specifically Indigenous, like there's still satire in there. There's still, I want you to think about it. You don't got to believe like me. I'm not trying to, be preachy about it. Like I think I was telling someone yesterday, the horrors and the story still take precedence over the message. The message is just there if you want to go deeper. So, enjoy the stories, but get to that deeper level, because it's there. It's layered and textured, and that's the best type of horror writing for me, is when there's, that depth to it. No,
I totally agree with you. I think that there, even books and in film, I think it goes for both. I think horror is such the perfect genre for messaging and for deeper connections to another person's reality, and then that's including other people's, life experiences, or what their ancestors have been through. That includes things like anxiety, depression, loss. I think those are all things that they fit so well in the horror genre. They go so well together, messaging and then the horror, scary, spooky side of it too. So no, I think that's great. I love it. It's on my TBR, so I will be reading it. I'm going to get a physical. I'm one of those people. Like I'd rather, and especially because like this will be my introduction to you. And I always like to make sure I have a physical of at least, the first release of a conversation that I have with someone. So maybe the first of many, hopefully. But yeah, well, congratulations on the release. And thanks again for making time. Once again, links for everything, where to find Jacy, as well as where to get a copy of Bury My Heart with a Keyboard, will be in the description for this episode. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We hope you have a good rest of the week. Enjoy the weekend when we get to it, finally, if it ever shows up. And we'll see you in the next one.